We're going to be, I didn't put our marquee verse for this series, Mark 11 in there, and I'm going to put that up there so that I want us to really memorize. Therefore I tell you, whatever you ask for in prayer, we should believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. You know, I know prosperity preaching gets a bad name, and I'm not doing that at all. Don't get me wrong. But I believe that God has a plan and a purpose for you. He has a plan and purpose for me, and when our prayers line up with that plan and that purpose, there's nothing God can't do in your life. I want you, as we continue this series, you know, I don't know if you know, but I've already done 8 weeks of this back in October and November. I'm just going to pick up here. I know it seems like, but a couple things to keep in mind. The supernatural is natural for God. The supernatural is natural. It's not something, you know, he doesn't have to wake up in the morning trying to figure out a way to work up a miracle. He said, well, what do I got to do? What do I got to eat? You know, I better make sure I have my Wheaties today so that I can do a miracle. He's the one who spoke this world into existence. He's the one who hung the stars and keeps them lit. He's the one who placed the sun and fuels it with an endless supply. He's the one who molded the galaxies and set them in motions to turn and move without any remodeling. He blueprinted your body to work in sync with every cell, every organ, every tendon, every muscle, every nerve. He doesn't have a sensor on each planet that tells him when the temp is too high or too low. He doesn't need Alexa to tell him what the weather is. He set the weather in motion. He doesn't need Google to show him what the Grand Canyon looks like. It was his hand. No. It was his voice that spoke that Grand Canyon into existence. He doesn't need YouTube to tell him what the history of the universe is. He was there at the beginning when the universe was formed from the vibrations of his voice. Miracles are not something God does. Miracles are who he is. And today I want to look in Exodus chapter 1. Most of us are very familiar with this story. And I'm sharing a message to you that I call a basket case. A basket case. Anybody ever felt like a basket case? Most of us know this story in Exodus 1, but as we walk through this one more time, my prayer is that God will stir in your spirit how God is always looking for an opportunity to do the unexpected in your life. God is looking for a miracle to happen and take place in your life. Exodus chapter 1, starting in verse 6. We know right now that all the Israelites have come into Egypt because of the faith of Joseph. And that's where we get the verse, what you intended for bad, God intended for good. And we go back and we look at that when we talked about Joseph, how he looked over his life. And most of us would say when we look at Joseph, how he was sold into slavery and then he rose up to the top and became the man in charge of the house. And then all of a sudden, because of the word of a woman, and we live in a day and age where one thing can be said about you, you all of a sudden find yourself in prison. That's happened to Joseph. Joseph, he knows what they're going through. And Joseph, well, he said one woman said one thing, and the next thing he ended up in prison. And he rose up to the top again. A lot of people could have looked at that life and said, man, that's a guy who can't catch a break. But Joseph turned around and he looked at it and he says, you know what? God put me in that place. God called me to be a slave. God called me to be a prisoner. God put me there. And he turned that around. What you meant for bad, God intended for good. You know, you can't start looking. Don't look at the bad things at your life and give them the spiritual what's up. You know what I'm saying? Don't look at your life and say, you know what, man, my life is, I'm not in the place that I want you to be. Let me tell you something. If you're serving God and you're seeking him, you're right where he wants you to be. Exodus chapter 1, in time, Joseph and all of his brothers died ending that entire generation. There are a lot of, listen to me, there are a lot of times when your miracle will come to an end. Now, I wanted to say that all miracles come to an end, but I just didn't have time to really work that through my spirit and let it simmer in my spirit. But listen to me, the enemy is willing to wait until that moment when you forgot the last miracle that happened in your life. He's willing to wait. He waited for Joseph and his brothers to die, for this all of a sudden to happen. And when the Lord, when what the Lord has done in your life becomes just a memory, when you hang on to what was done in the past instead of looking at what God is doing or what God is about to do in your life, you're going to end up just like the Israelites did here in this story. See, I wanted to say that all miracles come to an end, but before I make that statement, I want that to really simmer in my spirit. But I do know that some miracles do come to an end. Many of you know that because in your life, God did a miracle, and you've hung on to that miracle. You've hung on to that moment, and right now in your life, all you're doing is looking back to what God used to do. You don't know what God is ready to do or what God can do in your life right now because you're still back here at that miracle that God did 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. But you need to bring yourself to the spot where you say, my dry bones are rattling. You see here in Exodus chapter 1, verse number 6, a miracle was ending. Even the memory of that miracle was coming to an end. There was no more Pharaoh who gave the Israelites the land to stay and grow and be free. Joseph was gone. The person in the middle of the miracle, the person that God used, the instrument to facilitate that miracle, he was the center of that miracle. He was the catalyst. He was gone. No more brothers who told the story of the miracle. The ones who received the miracles, the ones who knew firsthand of the power of God and what God can do, the ones who had the passion to make that memory real in their sons and their daughters and their brothers and sisters, gone. And many miracles in our life, they come to that place. They come to that place where the memory fades, where the passion dims, where the experience dulls, where the emotion evaporates. Gone. In your life, what is that miracle that is so far in the past that it is barely a memory anymore? There's nothing to hang on to anymore because your Joseph has died. His brothers are gone. You don't see God as the God of the impossible anymore. You don't see God as the creator of the universe, the creator who hung the stars and put in place the moons and molded your body in such a way that it fights disease and it runs on its own. So what happens when we begin to lose our passion for the power of God? What happens when our memory fades of what He has done in our life? It makes you a basket case. You may get your miracle today, but it may be over tomorrow. And if all you do is hang on to past miracles, your passion will become impaired. Your memories will minimize, your drive will drown, and your dreams will dwindle. You're going to become a basket case. Let's see what happened to the Israelites in Exodus 1:7. But their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly that they became extremely powerful and filled the land. When we go a few more verses, we're going to see what the Egyptians were doing in the Israelites' lives, but even, listen, even this is how awesome God is. Even when the miracle is over, there still can be blessings continued. See, the miracle was over, but the blessings kept on going. That is why it is so easy for the memory of the miracle to fade, for the passion to morph into something that is contrary to what God has intended. God has given us a worst case scenario when we lose our heart for God here in Exodus. But let me just pause here for a moment and say our heart for God has to be more than just the way that we act. It has to be more than the way that we talk. It has to be more than the way that we live. Our heart for God has to be able to see God move, to do his thing that is in direct contrast to what the world tells you. Our heart for God has to be an expectation for that miracle. Miracles should be our normal, just as they are normal for God. For that same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, it dwells in you. That Spirit that put life back into a dead body, it's yours. You walk in that Spirit. Miracles should be our normal. Our heart for God is not to be friendly to this world, but it is to live in direct conflict of this world. And when you live with a heart after God, you will live in conflict with this world. In fact, the word tells us that if we are his followers, there will be conflict. But here's what's awesome. Miracles tend to happen right in the middle of that conflict. People ask, why don't we see miracles happen anymore? Because we're afraid of the conflict. Hey, let's stay away from that. Let's not talk about that. Oh, I can't do that. Miracles happen right in the middle of conflict. There's no reason for miracles when nothing's wrong. When everything's going right, there's no reason for a miracle. I don't need God to touch my car when it's running fine. But when I find it broken down on the side of the road, I need a miracle. Think about it. Let's continue in Exodus. Exodus, verse number 8. Eventually, a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. Just as God has a plan for your life, so does the enemy. Listen to that. A new king. There's a new sheriff in town. A new king came. Didn't know about Joseph. Didn't know about Joseph's brother or his dad or what Joseph did. Heard stories. Oh yeah, I heard that one. And all of a sudden, that country began to turn against God and that God's people. And fear begins to come over that king. He says, whoa, they're getting bigger than we are. They're getting stronger than we are. Jeremiah 29:11 says, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. Just as the Lord has a plan for your life, so does the enemy. For I know I have plans for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Let's flip that around and see what, and that would be what Satan would be saying to you. We'll call it Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, says Satan. They are plans for disaster and not for good, to end your future and make you hopeless. We know John 10:10 that says the enemy has come to steal, kill, and destroy. But Jesus has come to give us life and life more abundantly. Yeah, Jeremiah 29:11. I know the plans I have for you, the plans for disaster and not for good, to end your future and make you hopeless. I know a lot more Christians who have that scripture hanging on the doorpost of their hearts than believe that God has their best interest in mind. In fact, many believe it so much that they decide to help out Satan. Oh, I don't know. I don't have to do exactly what the Bible says. I can live some in the world and some in the church. I'm not going to even say some as a Christian. Because when you're living halfway in the world and halfway as a Christian, you're really not a Christian. Because we have too many today who claim to be Christians but are just really churchgoers. Now understand this, I'm not trying to condemn anyone. But every now and then we have to pause and check our hearts. Do we still have the passion? Do we still have the drive to please God? Or are we trying to do this in our own strength? Is it His Spirit that's leading us? Come on now, talk to me. Or is it my selfish self-will that... The most miserable person you will ever meet is one who tries to live for God but is in love with the world. I'm getting off track a little bit. Squirrel. Right? Exodus 1:11, it says this, so the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses as supply centers for the king. Just as Jeremiah 29:11 tells us, Satan, he wants us to be captive to this world. He wants to make us his workhorse. Listen to me very careful. Listen to me. Pay attention. If you're not building God's kingdom, you are building Satan's. That's what the word says. If you are not for me, you are against me. If you are not building God's kingdom, pay attention to this. If you are a Christ follower, pay attention. When you are building God's kingdom and Satan tries to oppress you, God's got your back. Listen, we just read Exodus 11, but Exodus 12 says this. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread. And what happened? The more alarmed the Egyptians got. What's going on here? We're trying to make life miserable for them, but they're happy. They keep growing. They keep going out and doing that stuff. Listen, in the middle of Satan trying to steal God's people, in the moment of Satan trying to kill God's people, in the midst of Satan trying to kill God's people, what was God doing? He was multiplying and spreading. He was boosting and building up. He was expanding and enlarging. He was compounding. He was blessing. He was sending His favor. Exodus 1:13 and 14 says this, so the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless with all their demands. You may be in the middle of that right now, but let me tell you, multiplying and spreading is coming. Boosting and building up is coming. The expanding and enlarging is right around the corner. He is compounding in you. In the middle of the enemy oppressing you, God is blessing you. When the devil is harassing you, people don't understand why you're happy and you're full of joy. When the devil is repressing, God is releasing. When Satan may be trying to dishearten you, but God is trying to develop you. Satan may be trying to execute you, but God is expanding you. Satan may be trying to suppress you, but God is strengthening you. Satan may be playing his tricks, and you think it might be a decrease, but trust me, God has an increase coming for you. You may not see it right now, but it is coming on your way. If you stay faithful and true to God, God is going to do something in you and with you that you never thought possible. Because God is the God of the impossible. And Satan is going to do everything in his power to get you to do his work. He's going to try everything to get you on his side, because Exodus chapter 1:15, it says this: Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. When you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If the baby is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. Let me tell you something. I was reading this, and I was going like, man, how dumb is that? How dumb is that? You know, when they, I'm gonna put this in Arkansas language. When they get all grown up, right? When they grow up, who's going to do the work? Who's going to lift those big bricks? Not saying, now don't misunderstand me, not saying that women, you can't do it, because I know you can. There's some of you probably putting me to shame when it comes to work and stuff like that. But you're going to need a few more women than you are men. I just go, that didn't make sense to me. But listen, when you are building the enemy's kingdom, you are going to do some dumb things. And I know every single one of you can tell me some dumb things that you did when you were serving Satan, when you were on the other side. You did some really dumb things. And right now you can just say to me, man, I don't even understand why I'm alive. Thought about sharing a couple, but then maybe you won't come back, because boy, you'd say that guy is dumb. That guy just is dumb. Listen to me. Parents, I want you to pay attention to this. I'm going to read that verse again. I'm going to read it, and I want you to think about you as parents. Right? Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave this order to the Hebrew midwives: when you help the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If a baby is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. If the enemy can't get at you, he's going after your kids. You look at that verse, he's going after especially the boys. You want to see the downfall of America. And I know some people say it's when prayer was taken out of schools, and I don't totally disagree with that. I believe that we need to have prayers. But there's part of me who says that when America quit the draft, and we quit making men into men, when men quit learning discipline, when men quit learning authority, when men quit learning to stick with their wives and their families and what it meant to be a father, this country started going downhill. And we need men to stand up and stop being killed by the enemy and start being fathers, start being the men of God that God has called us to be. Because he's coming after your kids. And if we're not careful, men, if all we're doing is playing church, your kids can see that. People, this is what blows me away. I'll see people who come to church, and they'll come to church once a month or twice a month. And then all of a sudden their kids, they grow up and they're not going to church. And those parents are like just wondering what happened. Why aren't my kids going to church? Because you didn't. My kids are halfways in and halfways out. So were you. If he can't get at you, he's coming after your kids. And parents, you better be aware. You better watch out, because the enemy has ways of getting at your kids nowadays that he didn't have when I was growing up. You have the whole world coming into your house. When you let your kids on that internet and let them do whatever they want to do, you're just asking for it. And some of us, we can just thank God that he was watching out for our kids because we weren't smart enough to pay attention. And if you're not going to pay attention to what they're doing on the internet, I'm telling you, you better be praying 24 hours a day. Because the enemy is coming after your kids 24 hours a day. Pay attention, parents. Pay attention to what your kids are doing. You didn't become their parents to be their friend. You can wait till they're 25, 30 to be their friend. And even then, sometimes you got to get all over them. Don't forget, Daddy is still Daddy. This is some good stuff. The worship team is coming back right now. Some of you need a miracle. We're going to finish this next week.